Why would a homeschool mom on a budget decide to use a paid curriculum over a free curriculum resource that both use the same philosophy of education? Well, that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to dive into a question we are commonly asked, which is, why did we choose to pay for a gentle feast instead of using the free resources available to us on Ambleside Online? Hi, welcome back. I'm Sarah Ruth from kindletogetherness.com, where we share about faith-filled homemaking, faith-filled adventures, and faith-filled learning. We are so happy you are here. And before we start our discussion about why our family chose a different curriculum from Ambleside Online, will you go ahead and subscribe to our channel? This is how you'll be notified about new videos as they come up. It's also how I know who is following along with us and what type of content I should be creating. So thank you so much. All right, so I told you that I was going to dive into the reasons why our family chose to pay for a curriculum instead of using the free resources at Ambleside Online. Before I get into that, I just want to take a moment and mention to you that the women who have poured their hearts out and their resources and their thoughts and their ideas and their time into Ambleside Online are amazing women who really wanted to make a Charlotte Mason curriculum accessible to more families, and I have great respect for these women and for their time. And so this is not a video to bash Ambleside Online. Many people I know use and love it successfully with their families. This is just Sarah Ruth talking about the reasons why there was a better fit for her family. And one of the primary reasons I am making this video is because I'm asked this question fairly often. Why aren't you using Ambleside Online? It's one of the most highly regarded resources available to home educating mothers who want to use a Charlotte Mason philosophy of education. So let's dive in now. Years ago, when my eldest son was 6 years old, we finished a very gentle, pleasant, wonderful kindergarten year, or a year zero, of Charlotte Mason inspired learning. And during that year, we used living books, picture books to do what I would call, based on Charlotte Mason's philosophy, a shaking of hands with the greats of our nation. We thoroughly enjoyed cooking together and learning about some of the forefathers of the USA, as well as reading many stories and folk tales that went along with that. Then my son was 6, and it was time for us to start his formal education. No more, super gentle learning, but now we're going to begin to use what Miss Mason has shared in her books, what Mama had read up on, and really implemented in our days, complete with, various subject areas that were giving the short, brief lessons and having my son narrate back. It wasn't going to be an option anymore to narrate. Now we're not just building his attention. We're not just trying to teach him to listen to the stories and to think about them, but now I'm requiring him to give me some feedback. So what was I going to use? Where was I going to get my book list? There are so many options out there. And one option is to build my own. As a working mother, that just wasn't going to work for me. So I knew I needed some assistance pulling that together. So I went to Ambleside Online based on the recommendation of several friends and people that I knew. Well, I had already read all of Miss Mason's volumes at this point, and I felt like, as somebody who had been a tutor for families that use her philosophy for several years, I did have a general working understanding of her premises and ideas for teaching history and teaching Form 1 students. So as I went about the Ambleside Online website, the first thing that I encountered was I was very confused. It did not feel user-friendly. It was difficult for me to find things in one common area. I had to like jump around from link to link to get to the various things, and it just felt very piecemeal. Now, that said, since that time, 4 years ago, they've made a lot of changes, and the website is much more user-friendly. So I just want to go ahead and say that here, that, well, for me, it kind of pushed me away a little bit because I spent several weeks navigating the website and felt very overwhelmed, and I thought, I can't do this, on a regular basis while I'm trying to educate my son. And at the time, I had a toddler and a newborn as well, and so like I needed things to be a little more accessible for me. But the good news is, if you decide to go on Ambleside Online to date, that's not what you're going to find. They have improved and updated their website, which is so encouraging and a wonderful thing for them to have done for us mamas. So the second thing that I noticed that was one of the reasons why I felt like we needed to make a different choice has to do with the book lists. And I personally understand that Miss Mason valued living books. She discusses a lot in her volumes what that looks like, that it looks like ideas that we can chew on. It looks like things that get us excited or interested or wanting to know more. It looks memorable. It looks like good vocabulary, not things that are watered down just for a child to consume. However, I don't read Miss Mason to indicate that every book that comes before our children needs to be at least 50 years old. And what I came across on the Ambleside Online website, and even as I perused it recently before I shared this video, is that almost all of the books are older. And in our current curriculum, we use many older books. I value having access to these tried and true classics and these tried and true history perspectives. So don't misunderstand me. But what I noticed was that at times there were better, more modern options available. However, Ambleside Online continued with the more antiquated versions. And so for me, I felt like I would rather invest in something else and get book lists that were more updated than stick with things that were quite dated. All right, so next up, and this was probably is the biggest thing that made me choose something other than Ambleside Online. Here it comes, okay? This is it. Where they start history. And this is a big deal because it's shaping our children's earliest memories of lessons and building their worldview. And as I read Miss Mason to instruct teachers, educators, mothers to begin history with what the child knows, it's just like geography. So in my son's early geography lessons, we begin inside our house. Miss Mason instructs us to start with what the child knows. And my children know their bedroom. They know our breakfast room where we have our lessons. They know our sunroom. So that's how I teach them geography. They build a 3D model of their room. They draw a map of it. We learn cardinal directions first and foremost in their bedroom. Then we learn it for our whole home. Then we extend outward to our street, to our neighborhood, to our town, to our county, to our state, to our region. You get it, right? It's the same thing with history. Miss Mason tells us that our children should become familiar with those in their own country first. That this is what the child knows. And so these are the people that our children should become familiar with first. This is the history they should know. Well, we live in the USA. I am raising little American boys. And so it didn't make sense to me why I would begin like Ambleside Online does in England. I do understand that Miss Mason did that, but Miss Mason was a Victorian British woman, and all of the children in her schools were little Victorian British children. So of course she taught them British history. Now, I had some great discussions with various mothers who use the Ambleside Online curriculum and really believe wholeheartedly in starting history, even for American children, in England. And this is why they shared that because our histories are so intertwined, and you would not have the extensive American history we do today, the way that it is, without the history of England, that you can't separate the two, and therefore our children need to have an understanding of British history first and foremost in order to build into their own history. It makes sense, like logically I can kind of see it, but however for me, I just felt like it was contrary to Miss Mason's advice, which is specifically to begin with what the child knows. My children do not know anything about England. And then to move outward to a sister country once they have learned their own country's history. So, sometime in Form 2, they begin to add in the history of the sister country with an intertwined history. So that is a personal take I have on, from reading the volumes, and everybody is going to land a little bit differently on that. It's perfectly fine. But this really was the crux of what had me shift my attention to other curriculums, because I felt like I just couldn't sit well with starting my children in the history of England before their own country's history, before they knew it well. So that's what we've been doing. And my eldest is now studying British history and it's going well. And then here was another thing that also had to do with history that really kind of was gum on my shoe, for lack of a better term, when I was looking over the Ambleside Online curriculums. And that is that Miss Mason talked about moving in chronological order with your children. And I had the luxury of starting my son off from the very beginning homeschooled. He had no other learning anywhere else. I didn't have to try to sift through where do I begin, what does he already know. And so based on what Miss Mason suggested, I should begin my son at the very beginning of known time for his country and move forward from there. However, I noticed on the Ambleside Online website that isn't really what happens in Form 1. They kind of jump around a little bit of everywhere. And even in the confines of 1 year, they're picking from various time periods. And for me, it just didn't fit what I perceived to be Miss Mason's suggestions for studying history chronologically. All right, so those are the primary reasons why I didn't choose the free Ambleside Online curriculum and instead chose to purchase another curriculum. The last one that I'm going to mention is, and this I hear all the time from other moms too, I do think it's a kind of a counterpart to something I already mentioned. I mentioned that a lot of the book choices are antiquated, and many of the books are accessible online. One of the reasons why they choose many of the books they do, they've discussed this, I've heard women in leadership at Ambleside Online share this, is because they're accessible on the free online archives. So you have the ability to go online, access this for free, and you don't have to pay a lot to educate your children. This is a blessing. If you literally have no money to invest in curriculum, what a blessing Ambleside Online is. You can absolutely use it, give your children a great education, and access all of these online texts. I must confess, I am not able to do much online reading. I don't really want my kids to do a lot of online reading. I want to hold the books. I want to smell the books. I know, weirdo. And I'm just not, like, I don't really read a lot of blogs. I don't have a Kindle. It's just not my flow. I'm an old millennial. I'm not a new millennial. So anyway, that was an issue for me. And furthermore, when you would go to purchase those books, they were very expensive, almost all of them. It was very hard to find these vintage books at a decent price without much searching, without waiting, putting your details on wait lists at used booksellers, hunting through library book sales. It just wasn't something that I had the time to do. And then lastly, people will often say, well, you can just grab the books at the library. Well, that also isn't really accurate. I've spoken to several other mothers, and me myself, I've had this similar thing happen. I looked up several of the books in our library, and I even tried to order them. We have an interlibrary loan from a huge region, and like over half the books I looked up were not available. Even in our large interlibrary loan system, I could not get them. Furthermore, the books are broken up over like 12 weeks or even longer, and you can't borrow a book for 12 weeks. In our library, I can only borrow a book for 4 weeks. I can get it for the first 2 weeks, and then I can renew it twice if nobody else is requesting it. But after that, I have to return it. So that was pretty big deal for me that I needed access to the books. So I have found that we like having the books in our home. I do wind up purchasing the books. It is a financial investment for our family and our children's education. So those are the primary reasons why we shifted away from Ambleside Online and decided to go with A Gentle Feast. I have spoken in other videos about the things that we love about A Gentle Feast, so I'm not going to go into that here. But if you have specific questions about Ambleside Online and how it's organized, or what my suggestions are, or any other questions just about this topic, I am happy to respond to you down below. So comment if you love Ambleside Online and I am off base and you think I am crazy. Feel free to comment below about that as well. I think my biggest takeaway with Ambleside Online is it may be a great fit if you can get over the history hurdle that I had, and that's not an issue for you. You don't mind starting in England with your little American children. Then I think what I think is that most mothers who have the time, like as in you don't have 9 children or you aren't working a job elsewhere, I work from home, I have multiple jobs. If you have the time, Ambleside Online can be a phenomenal resource. It is free to access everything that they have available, but you do need to plan, especially in the beginning when you are first beginning your journey with homeschooling and starting with Ambleside Online. You're going to need 6 to 8 weeks to organize your plans, to pull the things from the various places where they're at. It's just going to be a lot more work on the mother's side than a curriculum that the book list is easily accessible and they've laid it out for you in a more manageable and easily digestible format so that you can implement it more quickly. So anyway, there's my 2 cents. Take it or leave it. Maybe this wasn't for you. That's okay. I will be back another day with more homeschooling, adventuring, and homemaking from Kindle Togetherness. We are so glad that you are here, and if you have suggestions for things you'd like for us to talk about in the future, you're always welcome to put them in the comments of a video.